frankly, to reflect on something that happened here in the state not long ago, a matter of fact, very recently. It reflects on the anti-Semitic attack.
Okay, I've abandoned that. I've abandoned that slogan. But the point is that I've won in districts that he has won by over 20 points.
That it is so important to pass a resolution of this magnitude this week, and why it is necessary to go forward.
It's a roundtable decision. I'm your host, YangGang, and for today's video, we are going to cover what happened in the last Democratic debate of 2019, and if I'm counting right, the 6th total Democratic debate, even though this could be the 7th. I'm not completely certain, and I'm a little tired right now, nor do I really want to think about it too much and count back. Not that it really matters. But in short, there was a total of 7 candidates on the stage last night, featuring Andrew Yang, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Amy Klobuchar, and Tom Steyer. And I've pulled up a series of 4 articles to kind of talk about the debates as well as my general thoughts. And a lot of the articles kind of foreshadow my general thoughts from the debate. But I'll kind of start with my general thoughts and then see what the articles kind of have to say. So the first impression I had of the debate was a impression that I predicted that would happen in my pre-debate video about 5 hours before the debates began. And that was simply a lot of talk would be about Trump and his impeachment through the House. And that was true. It was actually the first question. And in the large part, I'm kind of happy that it was the first question for the debate because it kind of got it out of the way. And I rather enjoyed that happened first rather than being ongoing throughout the debate, which it wasn't as ongoing throughout the debate as I thought it would be, nor was the anti-Trump cause throughout the debate either, because it seemed like in the previous debates that there was more anti-Trump talk than cross-talk between the candidates or candidates really showing what they had to say. So I was also happy to see that. I also thought that Joe Biden was the most alive he's ever looked. He came across as a rather positive candidate than in the past. Before, he was more of a passive candidate, but still the front runner due to his reputation and his long side standing of being the vice president of Obama, which is a big boost. Even though in the debate he got a question basically about Obama and kind of went against what Obama said, referring to his age. The age question, what got a lot of rounds during the debate, as it was kind of a funnier type of question, since it was addressed to the older candidates, and Obama basically saying that old man need to get out of the way. And one of the articles that I'm going to reference has that quote in it, or a reference to the quote in it. I also thought that Pete Buttigieg during the second half of the debate, after the main first break, not the first break of the debate, but the main first break, was kind of what the moderators predicted in some ways, and that was that Pete Buttigieg would end up getting attacked more, and he did. But Pete Buttigieg, to his credit, was well prepared in the attacks that were addressed at him, especially the attacks with Elizabeth Warren through his campaign finance. What was a huge point during the debate with campaign finances. And with the campaign finances, Pete Buttigieg was well prepared in attacking Elizabeth Warren's status as being one of the higher tier candidates money-wise, and that his donors are from average everyday people. And then Elizabeth Warren fired back, saying that he's had donations from billionaires, and the way he's getting his donations shouldn't be the way it's done, referencing his wine cellar meeting that was held in private without the public really having much access to what was being discussed. And so they kind of went back and forth, but I thought that Pete Buttigieg had the upper hand in that argument and other arguments where Pete Buttigieg got attacked. He also had a moment that I think many Democrats are going to take home with him, and that was the moment about the Supreme Court, and saying that he, without the Supreme Court's one decision of gay marriage being allowed, wouldn't be able to express his feelings, and this is off of memory, so what I'm saying may not entirely be right, but the main sense of what he said was that he supports the Supreme Court's decision, and in that debate topic, they were talking about Trump's Supreme Court justices that he's been able to elect, and conservative justices on the Supreme Court in general, and that they want more liberal-leaning judges to be on the Supreme Court so that more progressive agendas or more agendas to help minorities will be allowed, rather than a conservative stance that may not allow some of those decisions. And he was saying that he came across as being rather a victor on that point, even though he wasn't necessarily getting attacked. I also thought that Amy Klobuchar had a few moments of rise that I think she really needs to have if she wants to move on, but I don't know if she's going to be able to gain enough attention to be able to win the Democratic race, let alone maybe even the next debate, but we'll have to see. And Tom Steyer didn't really have any moments of concern. I think he's going to take, besides Bernie, maybe the biggest climate change perspective out of any other candidate. And for some one-party issue voters with climate change, or maybe the average Democratic voter who's concerned about the environment might vote for him on that case. But I just don't think he's going to have enough attention to be able to move forward. Andrew Yang also had several good moments, but in a large degree, I think he's too moderate to win the debates for the Democrat and to go forward in the race. I think the average Democrat may like Andrew Yang and what he has to say, but I don't think the DNC are the more progressive-leaning Democrats that might outweigh the average Democrat will want him to move forward. But he had a major moment that I'll cite in one of the articles I'm about to read and talk about that I'll get to a little bit later. But he had several more viral type of moments during the debate. He probably had the most viral moments in the debate than any other candidate on the stage. So let's start with this first article I found from NPR. The title reads, 6 Takeaways from the 6th Democratic Debate. Excuse me. Biden was steady. Biden was crisper than most of the other candidates, and unlike those other debates, his steadiness lasted mostly all the way through. He slipped a question about whether he would run for a second term if elected, given his age at 77, and he was at times tougher with his opponents. For example, telling Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont to put his hand down while Biden was finishing an answer. And that address is kind of rather funny, because he was telling Bernie to put his hands down while he was speaking, as you can see here. And Bernie was like, oh no, I'm just waving at you. And they kind of had banter back and forth. It didn't really seem mean, but it was the first time that Biden really stood up for himself and told another candidate to basically shut up in a more politeful way. But addressing the question of the one term, I myself, as more of a conservative person than Democrat, but I wouldn't really call myself a full-blown Republican either, would think that his answer was rather smart and intelligent in the way he should be approaching it. Basically, he said, I need to be president first before I can think about running as a second term. And I think that perspective is valid, because you can't be something before you can be something else. So in other words, with my job, I might become a cashier, but it's not like I can say that I'm a cashier now. That tends to make sense, but as voters, we want that confidence. We want someone that we feel like is going to be president and going to represent us in a full perspective. So by saying that you might not even run for a second term might make you lose confidence in that person to be that someone you look up to as a president should be. As their second point says, and I addressed a little earlier, Buttigieg came under attack. It took a while for it to happen, but as expected, South Bend Independent Mayor Pete Buttigieg faced some pointed attacks. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, went after him on fundraising, yes, in a wine cave, as I stated earlier. Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota on his experience, the mayor So yeah, Amy talked about his experience, saying that he didn't think that a mayor of a small city, so to speak, should be able to be president because her experience is greater than his, and every other person besides maybe the two businessmen's experiences are greater than his is. But he kind of fired back, and I thought Buttigieg in general won that argument, and I think he, as I stated earlier, he won his biggest arguments when addressing the fundraising situation, and I'll see what NPR states here about that same fundraising situation. Buttigieg paired the attacks with some skill, especially towards Warren on fundraising. I am literally the only person on stage who is not a millionaire or billionaire. That was the quote I was referencing. Also, the article states, he said, adding, "This is the problem with issuing party tests you cannot pass yourself." And that was his most viral moment in the test. And I thought that was a rather good attack back. And I think he won that argument. But going on to this next article I have pulled up, it was a very good at getting quotes from each issue. And I was going to highlight a few from each. I was going to highlight a few quotes on each major point that they talk about. So for disabilities, they kind of talked about how the U.S. tends to think that they care for people with disabilities, but rather they don't care. And that's kind of how the question was addressed. And Yang obviously has a special needs son, so I'll read what Yang had to say in the debate, and this is one of his more viral moments. "We go to employers and say, this special needs employee could be a contributor in your workplace, and that is correct, but that's not the point. We have to be able to say to our kids that you have intrinsic value because you are American and you are a human being." And then I'll read our Buttigieg's quote on education. "I do think that if you're lucky top 10%, I still wish you well, but don't get me wrong, I don't want you to go ahead and pay your own tuition." So basically, he was addressing the question. He is not a full-blown Bernie or Elizabeth Warren type of candidate where he wants college to be free for everyone. His idea or perspective is that the top 10% should pay for their college and other people's college to be able to support lesser economic standards that people might have. And I think that as a perspective for a Democrat might seem as a good idea, but from my perspective, I don't really quite understand how he plans to do it or what the tax rate or what the tuition would have to be, and I would kind of have to know that to have a full perspective, but I don't think that the idea is really going to work. And I'll read Biden's quote on reparations. "The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but is bad for America. They are the future of America, and we should invest in them. And that was talking about the immigrants. And that was after he got asked a different question where he actually didn't even address in the question because he wanted to answer the question that the moderator asked before about immigrants. But I think that was Biden's most biggest moment in the debate, as he came across as really truly passionate than any other time that I've seen in his debate stage or even in the debate before. And then I'll read all the quotes on campaign donations because really I think that was the biggest question of the debate, and just kind of seeing what each candidate is and providing the perspective for each one I think is very important. So Warren, "We have made the decision many years ago that rich people in smoke-filled rooms would not pick the next president of the United States." So that was again her attack against Buttigieg. Buttigieg said, "According to Forbes magazine, I'm literally the only person on this stage who is not a billionaire or millionaire." And we've kind of already read that quote, but that was his biggest point when coming back. Klobuchar, "Instead of what divides us, what a campaign finance reform that means passing a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United." So that was Klobuchar's kind of big point, that she's saying she's the only candidate who has ever done anything law-wise for campaign finances, and that should be important to all other candidates and is important to her. Sanders said, "I don't have any billionaire contributions. My good friend Joe and his friend He's received contributions from 44 billionaires. Pete, on the other hand, is trailing. Pete, you only got 39 billionaire contributions. And then he later in the quote basically said that Pete needs to catch up, or is a competitor, and that he would want to catch up, kind of as a mild attack against Buttigieg. But as a whole, I don't know if people really care that much about how many billionaire contributions he had. And I think the people that do care might side with Sanders on that quote, basically as saying that, the average person wants Bernie compared to 44 billionaires who want Joe Biden. But the last one I was going to read, or the last from Time Magazine, I was going to talk about their 7th, 8th, and 9th points, and then we can conclude the video from there. And I highly suggest reading the Axis.com article in its entirety, because it has quotes from every single issue, and I didn't cover every single issue in it because it would go on for a long time. And I don't think that everyone wants to sit down as long as I do when recording the videos. But anyway, I think it's important to kind of understand a mild perspective on what all of the candidates said. But going back, I'll read their 7th point. The Supreme Court finally got some love. Trump made nominating conservative judges to the Supreme Court a central part of his 2016 campaign, but Democrats have been slower to evaluate the idea, despite growing calls from advocacy groups. That changed his Tuesday night's debate. Biden and former HDT Secretary Julio Castro both strongly condemned proposals to embrace court packing. So in other words, that's when a president decides to heavily favor one side of the perspective. So in other words, you can bring as many conservatives as you want, or even increase the amount of seats just so that you have more conservatives than anyone else. And the fact that they're going against that now kind of makes them have a perspective on the Supreme Court. And to the average Democrat, and to maybe even the average human, that is a good thing, because we don't really want court packing, as we've seen in several other historical moments that was never really been a good thing. The 8th point, as stated by Time Magazine, no one had a good answer for how to handle Trump's baseless allegations. And I'll read. While absent from the stage, President Donald Trump set much of the agenda earlier in the debate. The first 20 minutes centered on a House impeachment inquiry into Trump's alleged efforts to push Ukraine and China to investigate Biden and his family. While Trump's alleged high crimes under the investigation, the former vice president was forced to defend himself too. The situation called to mind a 2020 version of Trump's 2016 obsession over Hillary Clinton emails, a story that dodged her campaign well after the Justice Department said she had broken no laws. So that was kind of a big side point of when they mildly attacked Joe Biden. But as a side note, I don't remember it too well, but from what I remember, I don't think that Joe Biden really got harmed from it much. So in conclusion, the debates, I thought the debate this time around was the most was the best debate I've seen so far, and I think that Joe won the debate, but I do think that Andrew Yang had a good showing in the debate as well, and had a few very viral moments, including the moment where it basically said that men are idiots, or become idiots if there are too many of them. I think that that was probably the most viral thing, at least on Twitter, with a lot of people memeing and just generally making fun of Yang's statement. And I do remember hearing Dennis Prager, who is obviously a conservative guy, earlier when I was listening, just to kind of see that aisle's perspective. And he was basically making fun of Yang, saying that like the founding fathers who made the Constitution that he's making fun of, do you think that they got dumb just because they were all men? Which is a rather stupid saying, and I think that Andrew Yang's saying for the average American comes across as being a rolling eyes statement, even though it might have some baseless truth to it, or truth to it. But I also think another thing that was rather good from Andrew Yang for a lot of people was saying that he was the only minority candidate. But where I think he kind of dove off the deep end was saying that Cory Booker might come back in the next debate, or he hopes he comes back in the next debate, so that there are more of a minority perspective on the debate stage. And I don't know if calling out a candidate based off their color who couldn't make the polling numbers or the availability to be in this debate is a good idea, because I do think that Cory Booker, although he is a person of color, comes across as very cringeworthy even to his own people that you think would fully support him through that, because I don't think that people vote just because of the color of your skin. I hope that's not the case. I don't think America as a whole is racist as the media wants you to think. I do think that a person of color might have a harder time even still today, but I don't think that being black is the only thing that's preventing him from being on the debate stage. I hope you liked the video, and catch you with the next one.